Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to put together a summary of kind of my block leading into the North American Championships, kind of talk about what went well, what maybe needs some fixing or some tweaking, and takeaways leading into my next meet, which is going to be Nationals in March. So I like to do these kind of like introspective recaps after every major block of training and after every competition. And I find what it helps me do is kind of sift through the different variables in training, as there's always something that can be changed or that goes wrong or that goes right over the course of a training block. And hopefully what that allows me to do is kind of keep the things that go well, convey those to Bill McCarthy, my coach, and then kind of pull out the things that we needed to work on. And whenever you mesh those together over long periods of time, hopefully you end up with that kind of optimal training approach for the biggest meets when they count. Now, kind of starting at the beginning, this training block started on a really weird situation where I had the infection in my lower leg right after Nationals. I wasn't able to train for several weeks. Keep an eye out, I'll probably post a full video on like what that was and my recovery process. But to keep things short, I was stuck out of the gym for several weeks, and we had to kind of ease me back into that training process before we could get a full prep underway. So that's kind of one of those situations that are strange, and it's tough to pick out, hey, what was me getting back to baseline from that injury and what was actually like gains that were being made along the way. So overall, I think the training that we had far out from competition was exactly what I needed. We worked around the injury as well as possible, did a lot of hex bar deadlifting, which I got tons of questions about, and mostly that was just because my shin was physically sore from that leg infection, so I couldn't pull the bar against me as I would like to in a conventional deadlift. So to avoid that pain, we used the hex bar. And kind of similar situations where there was some buffalo bar that was supposed to be worked in, but I physically couldn't do that because of, ankle mobility. I had this big like open wound on the back of my leg essentially, so I was limited as far as like how much my knees would move forward. And to be completely honest, the lift that I was most worried about being affected by this infection was going to be the squat. I was worried if we were going to get it back up to par, and really that carried through a lot of training until probably that last big block leading into competition, when I started to realize, okay, we've got the squat back, we've got our mojo back, and we were able to put everything together. So that was certainly nice. Thinking back to that kind of off-season period that we had, I think the hex bar deadlift did me well for what I could do. Some of that time off, I think, from regular deadlifting made me feel a little bit out of the groove as far as like my positioning at the bottom of the deadlift, and that certainly reared its ugly head on game day, where my missed final pull was simply from, well, one, I rushed it and the bar rolled away from me, and then two, I tried to pull it back in while I was sitting into the deadlift, and I got in an unoptimal position. I don't know if that's a word, but a not so optimal position where I sat down too much, and that led to my hips going up first and being in a bad position, and I just dropped it. I think I could stand, and maybe moving forward, to have a little bit more practice off of the ground with regular deadlifts. We did a lot of RDLs, which really hit that traditional weak spot of mine, which is kind of right around my knees. But what RDLs don't do is give you a ton of time in the actual bottom of the deadlift. And by the end of training, I was doing almost all of my volume through RDLs, and then I was doing my heavy stuff from the floor, but at the same time, that's not a ton of reps, so I didn't get a ton of time off of the floor. I think that's maybe something that we could do moving forward. I don't think it was necessarily a detriment. I think the strength was there for the deadlift on the day, but I think that's just some nitpicking going on. Now, I know I jumped to deadlift there. Now, going kind of back to squat, I think our approach with squat was perfect. My dieting down went really well. I felt like my squat was the most affected during training with that, and we carried a lot of fatigue all the way up until that 2 weeks out mark. So Bill, I kind of conveyed to him that I was feeling beat up after that 2 weeks out point in training, and squats felt really slow. And leading into nationals, my heaviest squat that I hit was 770 pounds, so 350 kilos. And this time in training, I was supposed to hit an RPE 9, and I only hit 340 kilos, which is about 750 pounds. So that's kind of a funny dichotomy here, where I hit less in training, but I hit substantially more on meet day. It was something like an 8 kilo PR, which translates to like 16 and a half or so pounds more on game day at this meet than I did at nationals. So I kind of do like that approach. I like not going quite as heavy, because one thing with the 750 pound squat in training, I felt like there was room, and sometimes it helps with that confidence, especially once I watched it over, because it felt like it was slow, but looking at it, it moved really well, and that built my confidence. I was like, okay, there might be 30 pounds there. Whereas the 770 before nationals and some of the heavier squats we've done in the past have been a little bit more up against the limit. If I remember right, that was supposed to be an RP like 9.5. And because it's so slow, the thought process is more of like, is 5 kilos there? Is 2.5 kilos there? How much is the rest and recovery going to help on the taper? So I did like kind of bringing momentum into the meet. Now, with that said, going into this meet, my body weight was going like this, right, as we were training. And on the slope, I would say we were about here at 14 days out. And that gave me a couple of weeks to train. I would say I hit a really light point 3 weeks out, and then I actually upped my calories leading into the 2 weeks out mark for those heavy lifts, and then I kept them consistent leading into meet day. What I would like to do for this giant training block leading into nationals, I want to keep my body weight kind of trending down, get somewhere to that like 120 to 121 kilo mark through dieting, and then slight bulk up to maintenance at like 123. And I think if I can get 6 months at 123 kilo body weight rather than 3 weeks leading into the meet, that's going to allow me to get really comfortable kind of where my body is. And I think that'll carry over even more to squat come nationals time. So that's something that I'm leaving very excited about in this next prep, right? But overall squats felt great on meet day. I think we did a perfect taper because I felt so beat up 2 weeks out, and then we tapered it perfectly, and on meet day squats were just on, right? From the first warm up all the way to the platform, I could tell, okay, I've got a big squat in me, and I think there was some room left in the tank. So I'm really excited to where those can go. Moving on to bench, right? Bench of the 3 lifts was feeling the best. So it's kind of funny. Squat felt the worst but I think it performed the best. Bench felt the best and performed kind of at par. And then deadlift felt pretty good. It was that middle line. And I want to say performance was poor, but really it was a positioning error on my part. So I think the strength was there at a decent level. So I don't want to call that bad necessarily. So with bench, we spent a whole lot of time with variations. Football bar bench, a lot of bamboo bar bench, which people love to comment on here on YouTube. And understandably so, it's a weird movement, kind of for a niche reason in my training. So I kind of conveyed to Bill that I hadn't trusted my shoulders really since my delt tear that I had last July, right? So like a year ago. That whole training time, it was kind of recovering. I had another retweak of that about midway through fall. And even though I had a solid probably 12 or so week cycle with it feeling relatively healthy, I just never trusted it on the descent of the bench leading into nationals. And that really led to my nationals underperformance. And it was between that trust and I didn't trust it to pause very well. So in training leading to nationals, my pauses were terrible. And it showed up on meet day where once I had to pause things, the strength kind of got sapped really quickly. We fixed a lot of that in this training block where he gave me the bamboo bar bench. Because it throws you all over the place, it's going to strengthen those surrounding muscles. Now, I know there's a lot of literature and people who oppose the stability training and how effective it can be, and I totally get where they're coming from, but anecdotally, it made me trust this structure a whole lot more because you're going to be thrown around a whole lot in a bamboo bar bench, granted with less weight, but what it did was in a regular bench press, if I got a degree or so off, it was still okay because I trusted my joints to be slightly in that deviation and not give out on me. So I feel like the bamboo bar did wonders for me in just trusting my own body again to support the heavier benches that came later. And then we also trained the pauses and tempos. Leading into nationals, I just felt so inconsistent with my touches on bench. So the implementation of tempo benching, right, that 5 count down tempo and then up really helped my bar path, right, especially with the grip change that I made to protect my elbow or my shoulder a little bit. And then also long pauses. So my competition pauses leading into this competition were so much better than the last competition. That combined with my less drastic weight cut at the end, I think those added together to make for a very strong bench day and to finally be able to hit that bench PR that I've been looking for since it might have been the 2018 Arnold. I think it was 2019 in March, right? So we're talking about 4.5 years of training for that bench PR at 120 kilos. So I was happy with 217. I think we might have been close, like 220 might have been the number that I could have done on the day. But that leaves a ton of momentum for the next training block. My bench tends to respond to volume really well. I'm going to continue being consistent on the pauses. And the last thing I want to mention is I switched to flats on bench, which I don't feel nearly as pent up. Maybe my arch is slightly less, but I've never been a great archer anyway. So what it does is it relieves some of that back tension to where I would get the back cramping. And even on my third attempt bench press, I was getting set up and my shoe slipped because the Alico platform's a little bit slick. And even though I was slightly out of that tucked in position, that I would normally have, I was still strong enough to press that weight. So overall, very happy with bench. I think a lot of the accessory work we've been nailing. Tricep and bicep as well, which I think helps with that stability. So overall, I think it was a wildly successful block. I think some of the things that went really well was weight management and early weight cutting, sticking to standards, right? Pauses on the bench press, and some of the variations like the bamboo bar bench press, I think was a huge help in my training. Overall, squat was just consistent, even though it didn't feel great all the time. So it's another testament to just kind of trusting the process. Safety bar squats seem to do wonders, and they protect my elbow. I will throw out there, I had some elbow discomfort almost the entire training block from low bar squatting. So you'll notice I wore elbow sleeves exclusively in my training for squatting, but I did not wear them obviously on meet day, and it was totally fine. And that's another thing I'll mention. I wore elbow sleeves for zero bench pressing other than the incline bench. But like competition benches, I stayed away from the elbow sleeves, and I think that kind of helped me stay competition specific, and that's another place I went wrong leading into nationals. Finally, deadlift. Hey, things were going well, feeling good. Even on meet day, it felt good, but I just made a classic rookie mistake trying to force myself into position once the bar started rolling. Next time I will reset myself and it'll be completely fine, and I still stand by the fact that I think I was strong enough to lift my third attempt deadlift. It was just a positional thing. So I'll come back and get that after this training block. For now, I'm looking forward to some major off-season training, out-of-season training, build some volume, and build up a big total. I think something really big is there for the taking in March, and I know that Mike and Enrique and anyone else who may be coming to nationals are going to bring their best. So I need to just focus, continue with the diet. I'll go in this week, do a little bit of bodybuilding stuff, and then next week we're right back to work. And I will continue being strict on the diet, because I think that is the game changer that'll lead to winning nationals for a second time. So thank you all for watching. I know this was a long video, but I wanted to kind of wrap up the training block. Once again, thanks for following along with this journey. I'm excited to transition now to nationals prep. It'll be a long, kind of grueling prep, but I'm glad to have you all along with me. So yeah, thank you all, and until next time, happy lifting.